Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our 10th anniversary celebration of TCCA. We're excited to recognize attendees from all over the world who have registered to be with us today. My name is David Fralke, and I'll be hosting this session along with my co-host, Sarah Perez. Sarah? Before I introduce the presenters, I want to go over a few things with you. The title of this session is going to be called Using Technology to Help Our Special Needs Students, Part 2. We just had Part 1, and we had an awesome turnout, so this is Part 2. And it will end promptly at 3:50. And so we can prepare, well, for the end of the day. If you have any questions during this presentation, please enter your questions in the chat to the right-hand side. At 3:40, we'll give the presenter a 10-minute warning and allow them time to wrap up and answer any questions at the end. And also, don't forget your secret word of the day. It helps you open your certificate, and that way you get credit. So be watching for the super secret word of the day, and we are ready to start with Robert MacNeill and Heather MacNeill. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. As I said, I'm Robert MacNeill. This is my sister Heather MacNeill, and we are going to talk about using technology to help our special needs students and the crazy balancing act that is. This is adding to the session 1. We're going to be talking a lot more about how to deal with it as we are currently in with a lot of people at home and some of the new tricks that we have to adapt to. So, but some of the information at the beginning is the same, but a lot of y'all, I think, are coming from the previous one. And so we are going to be able to go through some of this a little quicker. We call it a balancing act because essentially it is. We're always serving two masters. Every student has different needs, so we're not just talking about SPED kids and 504 kids and GT kids. We're also talking about LEP kids. We're talking about EL kids. We're talking about just the kid that didn't get enough sleep last night. Every kid in some nature is a special needs kid. So we have the balancing act is how do we do two different things? Heather talks a lot more about serving the student.
So when it comes to serving the students, we always want to make sure, especially with their special education, that we're following their IEP, which is their individualized education plan. For the LEP students, it's whatever type of special services, whether it's a bilingual dictionary, 504, is it kind of like a little bit of the extended time? GT, it's, teaching on a kind of sometimes it's a little bit of that extra work, but kind of like on a different level. So, but sometimes, you have those students who had a bad day. I know sometimes I joke around a lot of times is like, I'm having a bad day. My brain's not functioning right. I'm always complaining to my coworkers, you know what, today I need my accommodations. Even though I don't have any, I sometimes need them just because, sometimes we do have those off days. So it's making sure that we're taking care of everybody and we're addressing all the needs of every single student, not just those that have a specific label.
On the flip side, I'm a general ed teacher, and my whole thing is to serve that subject. I have to get them to understand a certain amount of things, because when it all comes down to it, when they take those end of year tests, the STAR tests, the SAT, the TSI, all these different tests, I'm the one. The general ed teacher is normally the one that's called on the carpet about that. So once again, it is very much that crazy balancing act. And so a little bit about the two of us.
So I am a resource and inclusion teachers because I have my special ed certification. I also have my general certification, so I'm able to teach all levels. But as a special ed teacher, I have to be ready to move to whatever subject any year. But for the past 3 years, I have been in Algebra 1. Prior to becoming a teacher, I was a counselor for the state of Texas, and I worked for DARS. And prior to working in DARS, I worked in speech and speech pathology and audiology. And I was a student in high school or middle school, high school, and college who had accommodations myself. So I have been dealing most of my life with special education and disabilities. So after any child graduates high school, I'm very knowledgeable about what services the state can provide to a individual post high school.
And I am none of those things. I have both a bachelor's degree in English language arts and a master's degree in British literature. I have my English language arts certification, and I have my ESL certification as well. Before I was a teacher, I worked for the Department of Defense, working with computers. And unlike my sister, I spent my high school years being very lazy and trying to find the easiest way out of things. And so I used technology, because this was at the birth, not the birth of the internet, but like the really early stages of it, and figuring out how do I get away with some things. So we came together figuring out, okay, well, how do we use these two things? You have to have the love of the subject. You have to understand the SPED side of it, but how do we now then bring technology into it? Because this is a technology conference. And so it was kind of this perfect meld about, well, how do we do both? And so that's my big thing is I look at, okay, well, how do we use the technology to make the kids, make it easier on our kids? It is this amazing balancing act. And the thing that we want y'all to always come away with, what we want you to come away with is that the reason we know that the kids need two teachers in that classroom is because there are two teachers in that classroom. If it was good enough, if one teacher was enough, they would only put one of us in there. And so that's the big thing I want you, to take away.
So again, like we previously said in the last session, is with the special education, we are the ones that kind of help advocate for those kids, as well as make sure that the um, accommodations that are necessary are given to those students. So we constantly looking at what is going on in the classroom and is trying to see what things can we implement, but also what things that are already on the IEP is kind of doesn't really need anymore, because it sometimes with both of us being in high school, we see, especially me being in ninth grade, I see a lot of middle school accommodations that we don't really use anymore in high school. So we're always going in and kind of changing it and making sure that it fits for them for the rest of their high school years. And also trying to determine, um, you know, when it comes to, especially in high school and with their IEP services, we have to make sure it is that they're putting forth the effort. They're so used to being pushed along that they no longer put forth the effort in trying to get their education. They're like, you know what? I'm still gonna pass. I'm still gonna move forward. In high school, it's a different beast. And they have to earn that grade. They have to earn that credit. So they have to put forth the effort. And so what we do at my school is we make sure that for extended time, they're putting forth the effort, because we don't want them abusing any type of accommodation, because it's not fair to a kid who is trying and get nothing. We always have to remember that these students with these accommodations put them on a same level playing field as a child without a disability. So to where they're finally on they're equal. So making sure that they're putting forth the effort. If they don't put forth the effort, they don't get the extended time. Oral admin, sometimes oral admin does not need to be teacher initiated. That we're trying to make sure to get these kids ready for post high school and being able to start advocating for themselves to where they're no longer dependent on a teacher, they're no longer dependent on a parent. They can talk for themselves. So if they say, hey, you know what, I don't need to be read to, I don't need every single question, or I don't need every single answer choice be read to me, I may only need one word read to me. Let that child advocate for themselves. So, again, remember that an accommodation or a modification is not dumbing it down. It's making sure it's on a level that this child will understand and be successful. And they're finally on a level playing field as a student without a disability. So, making sure that you're slowing it down or you're kind of, taking away an answer choice. It's not making sure that it's not dumbing down the content. You're still doing that, you're still teaching grade level content, is just providing a little bit of extra to make sure that they're successful.
Absolutely, absolutely. And from the generalist point of view, you got to find the things that are going to work for you. And the thing that I've found that works for me the best is Google Chrome. Most of the kids have Chromebooks. Google Chrome is a free app, and they have all those extensions. How do I do? How do I deal with the kid with that needs to have something read to them? If you can't get, or if you don't have time to do that, there's an app. I mean, there's an extension that will specifically read that to the kids. The kids with Erlands and dyslexia, you have these different extensions to help them with that. Now, in the previous session, somebody asked specifically about the color blue when it comes to Erlands and overlays. And no, blue doesn't have anything significant. They go through a whole lot of different colors, and they figure out the one that works best for them. So sometimes they'll say, well, they'll have to have a pink one, or they'll have to have a rose one, or they'll have to have any number of other ones. And then if you're like me, you need an accommodation to figure that out, because I can't tell the difference between all these colors. So I have to have their overlays labeled so I can then give them to those students. The beautiful thing about the kids or the Google Chrome, I'm sorry, is that once you set it up for them in one class, it goes with them to every class, and every year, as long as they stay within that school district. So if you have somebody, leaving middle school, coming to high school, and they log into Google Chrome, all their extensions and all their preferences show up, and it's just there for them. But it is a learning process. The biggest thing that I would tell any general ed teacher to do is to work with that SPED teacher. The SPED knows these SPED teachers know everything about the kid, what the kid is going through, but they didn't spend years going to school to learn about everything about this content area. And there are some of them that go to 2 to 3 content levels over the course of their career, if not even all 4. So we have to work with them and teach them. And so many times these SPED teachers are like, yes, let me soak up enough of this knowledge so I can then help these kids.
So one thing when it comes with special education, and you do have different types of special education teachers. You have your SLC teachers, you have your resource teachers, and then you just have your inclusion. So I am a resource teacher, but I also do inclusion. So I don't have a degree in math at all. I have degrees in everything is pretty much disability and counseling related. But with all I work so closely with my department chair, and I worked so closely with my entire math team that they got me to a level to where I'm able to teach algebra to to my resource students, and you can't tell the difference. And I go in and, I help with telling them, hey, you know what? this is how, here's a good way that I'm teaching my resource, and it actually does help the general teachers. You know what? They try it and they're like, you know what? I actually have more success doing it my way than a different way, because I do have I look at math, or I look at English, or any content, I look at it through a different scope. And my whole process and my job is, how do I deliver this content into a way where it is understandable to all students, not just sped students, but all students. And when it comes to, sometimes when it comes to trying to modify something, I give it to my brother, I give it to Robert when it comes to algebra. And if he struggles, I know my kids are going to struggle. So I know how to modify, because he's not well, he doesn't do well with math. So I use other people and other things to try to figure out, how can I approach this subject in a different way. And my brother is a guinea pig a lot of times for math stuff. And he does the same thing. I mean, I do have a good content with English, but when it comes to something specific, he'll ask me or he'll ask his co-teach. And it's all about partnerships and trying to find a way to deliver this content to all students, to where they, every single one of them, is able to understand.
You know that point in Thanksgiving dinner where all of a sudden one of your relatives calls you out for something that you don't do really well? That would just happened in a conference when my sister points out that I'm not very good at math. So we the big thing that we're focusing on this version of this is about what I absolutely hate this term, new normal. So that's the only time you're going to hear me say it. But we're going to talk about the way that we're teaching currently, where we are asynchronistic a lot of the times, where we're dealing with kids at home, and they are at home with the exact same disabilities that they had when they were in person. So we have to pivot too. And that's the hardest thing that we're having. That's why so many schools took 4 or 5 weeks off last year when this whole thing started after spring break. That is why, we different school districts are doing different rollouts. My puppy is trying to get up here. And so we broke these down into several issues. Now, we're talking this session specifically about how to deal with them when they're all online. And luckily, everybody in this room has had some time dealing with these kids online. And I say that luckily kind of facetiously, where it's unlucky that we're in the situation that this happens, but it gives us one more tool in that toolbox. Anybody that went through education in college knows that they were always talking about adding more tools to our toolboxes. So the first big issue is a speech issue. Now, this is interesting from the point of view of teaching online, because in a classroom you would do one thing, but the big thing with the speech issue with dealing with kids like this online is getting them to interact at all. If you get them to interact at all, you've gained a little leg up, and that is where your sped teacher is going to help you out, because we're all about serving that content and they're all about serving the student. And Heather has a very, very good example she's going to share.
So I have a student that, and it's happened several times, but this year I have a student who's very embarrassed when it comes with his speech disorder. He is, so when, at first, with this brand new year and we've never met these students, it's like, how do I service these students? Because I've never met these kids before. I know what they are on paper, but I don't know them personally. I don't have a relationship and I don't have a rapport. So pretty much when I first started this year, I started doing live sessions when we came back. And I had a student who, emailed me personally and was like, um, I can't attend your live sessions. And so I went ahead at the times that I had created. So I went ahead and scheduled a specific one just for him. And he comes on and I did my live session with him, and he said, I was trying to figure out, his schedule, because I did have other students who attended my earlier ones. And he did not feel comfortable about attending the ones where other people were involved because he was so embarrassed with his speech. So I went ahead and I was like, don't worry about it. I will work with you one on one until you are comfortable enough with me and my ability to manage a classroom virtually to where you're comfortable to finally attend that those sessions to where I didn't have to create an extra one. So getting to know the student, getting to know me and my way of teaching, he finally was able and comfortable enough to start attending my live sessions with other students. And he felt more comfortable and felt better with attending these live sessions with his classmates. And now that he is back on campus, he because with Aldine we split the alphabet, and luckily again his with his last name, he was the only student in my classroom um for that alphabet section. So when we finally got, okay, everybody from A through Z, he is fine with participating. He answers, he comes up, he's willing to help me teach a lesson. He'll go up and, you know, answer questions on the board. He's now comfortable with my classroom management style and my ability to manage the other students to where he's comfortable to speak and to teach part of a lesson that I want him to talk about. So it's getting them comfortable enough because there's really no technology. I mean, when it comes to speech. So you have Dragon Naturally Speaking, but those are for people who have the kind of the issues with the typing. They need the ability to speak and for it to type, but there's not really anything technology in order to help with somebody with a speech impediment. You can type something and it speak for you, but those are usually for individuals who are mute. But for those that just have like the articulation, is getting them comfortable with you and your ability to manage a classroom and the other students to feel comfortable to speak, and just make sure, you know, when they are ready to speak, give them time to respond. Don't expect them to respond immediately. Give them those few seconds, to those 30 seconds, 45 seconds, to get what they're trying to deliver out, and then praise them. Please praise them for, you know, speaking up. And even if they're wrong, if even if what they said is wrong, still give them that positive reinforcement because that's something that they need and they also appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. And with everybody being online, a big thing I know that we have a friend that is a theater teacher, and getting them to record themselves and knowing that this recording will not go anywhere other than just straight to you. It is so helpful because you can see that. And when I saw that my theater teacher friend of mine did that, I was able to do that for some of my English lessons. So we leave our speech friends and we go to hearing issues. And normally I would say, oh my goodness, the hearing issue is the one that I'm the least prepared to do. But this year I've had two deaf students, and so I've had to figure out how to get to them online. And what I found is we have these amazing resources, and I've had to do phone calls with their deaf parents and learning how that whole thing works. And there's these amazing resources there that if you just reach out, somebody will tell you about them. But the thing I want to say is that the ASL interpreter, American Sign Language interpreter, is amazing. What I do is I make a weekly video teaching my different lessons. I've had to modify a little bit of the way that I do teach, which is like, if people know me, they know that I use my hands a lot when I teach. But if you notice in this, I'm not using my hands very much because I had to learn that that's very distracting to my deaf student. So I will record Monday's lesson on Thursday, saying that it's Monday, send it to my ASL interpreter. She then puts herself signing the whole thing in it, and then I send that video to just the kids that need it. and that's just something. So a little bit of preparation is the big thing. So I saw that somebody, Emmeline, said, how do you do both? How do you serve both the general ed content and the sped content? And it's about working together with your sped teacher, working together with these resources. We cannot do this alone as general ed teachers. And my puppy thinks that I can't do this alone because she wants to be involved too. But we have to sit down and say, okay, well, how's the best way we can attack this content, modifying quizzes that are online, all of these different things. So for our hearing issues, you go through that. And I'm sure when I turn it over to my sister, she's going to have a whole bunch of other amazing things that I've never even thought about, because that's what she does.
So when it comes with your hearing disabled, okay, it's very important that, so my brother is a very animated individual, and when it comes to whether it's slamming a door, and but it's making sure he cues those hearing impaired students to, hey, I'm about to slam a door, because it will make a huge noise and it will hurt their brain pretty much. So when you are pr- everything, when it comes to the partnership between sped and general, it's all about timing and making sure when you do have a hearing impaired student and that relies on ASL, you have to make sure that you record it early enough to where you can send it to the interpreter. You also, if you're going to put something up onto your screen, some type of wording, make sure it's always in the same place, because the interpreter will have its own little box. And whether it's not in like a top corner, like over here, something, they're always going to be in the same place. So you want to make sure that any type of word is not in that area where the interpreter is going to put their box up to show the interpreting. Also, if you are doing a live session, make sure and you get an interpreter, because we have like my brother said, we have amazing interpreters at Nimitz High School, and get them to join into your live sessions and have them interpret in that live session, because we have to record those live sessions. So if we're able to have the interpreter go ahead and record it or interpret as you are doing your live, then you're going ahead and cutting out that extra time. You don't have to do so much prep time anymore. You can just, hey, you know what? Here you go. Here's the live, and go forth. But if you're just doing, hey, a teacher made video, that has to be done earlier. When it comes to communicating, or if you have a deaf student who is not participating, please let your deaf ed teacher know, because it's kind of like a gap situation almost, where you have to let that gap teacher know that, hey, these kids aren't doing their work. Same thing, you have to let that teacher know, that deaf ed teacher know, they're not doing the work, so they can intervene and figure out what is going on and kind of get on to that kid. And if you not all the time you need to go through that or that deaf ed teacher. You can go through, it's called Swarson, or it's called, which is a video relay system, or you can use Purple. There's several different video relay services out there. They're free. You can download and you can put it on an app. You get your own phone number and you can use, and all you have to do is call. They put on an interpreter. The interpreter will call that other phone number. They're kind of like that middle person. So don't be afraid of deaf students at all. If you have a co-teacher who signs, utilize them too. I'm a co-teacher that signs. I can go in and be that interpreter. So there's a lot of times I've gone in and I've had to interpret myself, but I'm a last resort. I'm never that first person. I'm a last resort, because you don't want to violate any type of law in regards to interpreting.
Yes. With behavior issues, which is the next one, this is actually kind of the best one that has happened since moving to asynchronistic and online, in that for the most part, the bad kids aren't there all the time. So now that doesn't mean that we should be happy that they're not there. We are not. It just makes it a little bit easier when they're not going to be at the live sessions, Zoom bombing you or anything like that. Now, the thing with controlling some of the behavioral issues is understanding that you can mute the entire room, understanding that you can turn somebody's video off, that you can kick somebody from a room. These are basic things that are on the 3 or 4 main services that are used for video teleconferencing. Now, when you want to show something kind of like what we're doing right here on StreamYards, sharing your screen, it's also really easy on Google Meets and Zoom and all these other places. Sharing your screen is so helpful. But for behavioral issues, having one-on-ones with those emotionally disturbed students, having it to where that they know that it's a safe space for them. The cool down session that would be so important during an in-person face-to-face, when you're doing a virtual one, could just be, hey man, sign off for 10 minutes, come back in and I'll fill you back in, or watch the video later. Have these separate times specifically for our more complicated, let's call it, students. But we always want to make sure that we're still hitting everything with all of these kids, and that's the most important thing.
You know, behavior, you're still going to experience it. Just make sure that, if you do experience any type of behavior issues when it comes to anything online, make sure those kids are aware that, discipline, we can still write these kids up for any type of behavioral issue. So, and it can go to an AP and something can happen just because they're at home. There's still discipline that occurs in with regarding school. So making them aware that, just because you're at home doesn't mean you escape the discipline from an AP or anything like that, because you can get to that point where, you can no longer attend a live session. You're blocked for a certain period of time. We don't ever want to do that. That's kind of like that last resort. But it's, again, everything has to do with classroom management, managing those different types of behaviors. If it's a student who is emotionally disturbed, get your gap teacher involved. If they have to come into a live session and participate and sit there and watch, those students know who that gap teacher is. So they will act right when it comes to somebody else looking in on them. Have that open dialogue with those parents. It's important to establish as many relationships with us being in this virtual world, because we need all the support we can get.
And that has kind of been the best thing that has happened from this, is that general ed teachers have had to let go of our ego a little bit and say, okay, well, I can't do this all by myself. I have to rely more on my SPED teacher. I have to rely more on my gap teacher. I have to rely more on all these different things that, you start being a general ed teacher and you think that, the only person that you have to get help from is the head of your department. And then suddenly you learn that, oh no, I need to kind of cast a much wider net. Learning issues can be so many different things, but dealing with them online might be easier than even the behavioral one, because there's so many easy ways to modify and accommodate anything digitally when they're at home. Setting up different times is easy. Removing questions in a quiz is as easy as just deleting an option. Setting it up to where you read something to the student ahead of time, so you don't do it 40 times. You just do it once and it has your voice recorded saved. These things are so easy now. And I think that this is as terrible thing that all this has happened. This has been one kind of good thing, is that we've been able to figure some stuff out. So, but from a SPED point of view,
So it has, I mean, it kind of made maybe a little bit of the general education teachers a little bit easier, but it put a lot more on the SPED teachers. So, but it does make it a lot where, when it comes with resource, I go in and I sometimes I have to change the wording of a question. And it's really easily like my department chair puts in a question. If I like it, I keep it. If I don't, I change up the word or I change the question completely. That's how I'm modifying something. Or if it's just the accommodation, I remove a question or I put in a little hint to kind of, a reminder. Or I even put in like maybe an anchor chart. Here's a picture. Use this to kind of clue you in and back to what did I teach you previously. Put in all these visual resources will help them cue back into that whole, and it will help with that long-term retrieval. Can they retrieve something that, because a lot of them do have issues with short-term memory. Some of them have issues with long-term memory. You want to make sure that you're able to cue them in. Just using any type of resource you would use in the classroom, you can do it with any type of test online, whether it's through quizzes. With Aldine, it's through Schoology. We can upload all these different resources into Schoology. Kurzweil, when it comes to the reading something to a student, that oral admin, it was like, do we have to, put oral admin at a pause? We don't. Have them use Kurzweil. Kurzweil is our best friend. If you don't have Kurzweil or if you don't have Schoology, there's always some type of resource to provide that oral admin. With my students, I do both because sometimes I don't know if they're at home. I don't know if Kurzweil is set up onto their Chromebook at home. So I go in and I record the with my voice the question and answer for every single one in that assessment that is in Schoology. So they have that, but then also as a backup, they also have Kurzweil if it is available to them and they have it set up. I'm always covering all my bases. I do more than probably what is necessary, but I want to make sure I'm providing every single service I can so those students are successful and making sure that I'm addressing every single type of disability.
yes. Now the next one, hidden issues versus visible issues. This one has become even more important, I think, in the era that we are currently in, because what we say about hidden issues versus visible issues is if you see a kid on crutches, you know that they have a mobility issue. If you see somebody in a wheelchair, there's that. There's the facial features of some disabilities. But the hidden issues, normally you would say somebody with mental health issues, with a pain issue, with a GI issue, something like that. There, uh, but with this new digital thing, some other issues are being brought to light, such as poverty, large families, which is not an issue. But it becomes an issue when there's 8 hours of school, but if there's 4 kids, one laptop, that's now 24 hours. See, I can do a little bit of math. But we have so the easiest thing is to never have a student be required to turn on their video. That is the biggest thing that you can do to help, because they might put on a big show when they're in person, but if they have to show where they're living, how they're living, it could be a huge hit to them and then cause more emotional damage. And as teachers, we never want to cause harm to these kids. So doing something that simple can be very, very helpful.
Okay, I just want to break in here real quick. This is a 10-minute warning, and if you want to kind of start wrapping up your session, and if you have any questions at the end, we can answer those.
Okay.
So also when it comes with yes, you don't want them to turn on their video. But you also sometimes don't want to, sometimes they're, again, it's back to like the speech or something like that, to where they're embarrassed with, it's okay for them to have their video off and be on mute. But if they're participating through a chat, that is just the same as them participating with them speaking verbally. So be open and willing to accept any type of communication with that student. We have a lot of students, I have a lot of students who struggle with how to submit work. I tell them, email it to me, because I can still get it and I can still grade it through email, and that doesn't have to be through a secondary platform. Be accommodating and be willing to accept any type of work in any way possible, because we want them to be successful and we want them to move on to the next grade and they are staying on grade level. And with advocacy and testing, we have to advocate for these kids, because sometimes they're in a situation where they don't have anybody to speak up for them. So we have to be that voice for them, but use this time now to show them how to advocate for themselves, because that will only set them up for success later on. And with testing, be sure that they're if with star testing, we don't we keep telling them we're taking it. We don't know what TA is going to say yet, but hopefully they get to take it and we are able to, see that, what, even though we're in a virtual level, we're still teaching them and we can still get them past that star test. But if they don't feel comfortable taking a test, especially SPED, we are trying to push all the SPED kids to be testing online. Some of these kids do not feel comfortable testing on a computer. They actually say they do better with paper and pencil. Let them do it. That is their voice. Let them speak and let them be able to take a test the way that they feel more comfortable. And if they're back in class, and over summer, I had a kid, I took summer school. He did not have internet at all. He did not have a computer. I taught everything over the phone. He took a test, he took a picture, he texted it to me, and that's how I graded it. Be flexible with these kids since we're at a virtual field, because we don't know what their situation is at home, because some may live in an area they don't have internet. Be open to accept any type of work or any type of test in any form.
All right, and please, please, please ask questions, because I would rather you ask a question or else be able to be like, I don't know, please send me your email so I can get right back to you, than you leave us and not ask that question.
Any questions at all, or is there any questions?
I don't see any questions in the chat box at this time. There are some great comments saying that you guys have done a great job, great recommendations, great way of explaining everything. You guys have done phenomenal. And I agree with you, Heather, about being flexible. This day and age, especially being very flexible with the way that students are attending and submitting assignments.
Yes, we have to, we have to be able to accept work in any form or fashion, whether it's, hey, I'm taking a picture and I'm sending it to you through text messaging, whether it's through email or through regular submission, anything, because we want to make sure that, right now there's a big push of, getting these kids to pass. I've had so many, both of our campuses, because I work at Nimitz 9 and he works at Nimitz High School. We have so many SPED failures this 9 weeks. This is the first time we've had this many failures, where it's like, I've gotten to a point where as long as they're showing effort and they're doing work, I'm accepting that and moving on, because I don't want them, because they didn't choose to be in a virtual field. They didn't choose the situation we're in. We were forced into this. So we have to be willing and we have to be open.
Absolutely. So we do have a couple questions rolling in. We have Alice would like to know, oh no, sorry, not Alice. If there was, Stanford would like to know if there's a copy of the presentation, if they can get a copy of this presentation sent out. And then Emmeline would like to know, what platform do you use to get data points?
I'm working on figuring out how to share the presentation right now.
Okay.
Data points, Heather can talk about that.
So are you talking about data points for special education as a co-teacher, the data points we have to do?
That is a question for Miss Emmeline. Miss Emmeline, is that what you were talking about? Is it data points for special ed?
So I can kind of just get as much as I can. So with data points for special education, what I'm using is, are they participating? If they're not participating, then they get zeros across the board. But if they're showing effort and they're trying, then I use what they are able to do and how much intervention do I need to give. And that's where my data comes from, is pretty much how much do I have to step in and um, provide that extra service. If it's just, hey, you know what, you're doing a good job, or, are you understanding everything? If it's just checking for understanding, then they do get higher percentages. But if I'm like sitting there and I'm having to pull them and do small group and really kind of re-explain, I know that they're not understanding the material at length where they need to, so their percentages are a little bit lower. When it comes to testing, it's um I take in consideration of how much did I have to modify, or how much did accommodations were provided. And that's kind of how I pull data. If I saw that this student really didn't need much of anything, again, their percentages are a lot higher compared to those that needed a lot of that intervention. I hope that answered your question.
As for the sharing it, you can search for it on Prezi, Prezi, and for under using technology to help special needs students. And my last name, MacNeill.
I'm about to put it into the chat on
Okay.
on our streaming. Also, Fogarty is asking, what about IEP data points?
That would be 100% her.
So with IEP data points, it's really, again, for those, because I had students that were not participating at all. So what I did is I gave them zeros across the board, but under comments, I put activity posted, student did not access, and that keys. And then there's a special wording of that we were not able to establish whether or not the student was able to meet their goal because student did not access any of the material. So it's a lot of the key words that you're having to put. Then for those that are actually doing they're doing the work, I'm taking in consideration the kind of like their weekly assessments that we are having to do, and how much intervention did I have to put forth for that specific student. Was this student didn't need any type of help, they'll get that higher percentage. And how much accommodations or modifications were needed for another student, they'll be a little bit lower. And then when I do my data, I put in what accommodations did I provide for that student. Again, I hope that answered your question.
Okay, we're gonna have to break in here. It's time for us to stop. Y'all did an awesome job. I appreciate you taking your time on your Saturday afternoon for your preparation and all of your experience for special ed. Don't forget our secret word for the day is success with a capital S for the first letter. That's for your certificates for the attendees. And I appreciate everybody taking this Saturday and enjoy what's left of it. Have a great day. All right, thank you, everybody.